So I thought I'd do another video where I cook my chicken just before it's done. So I've been doing the gym tips and we did the real talk with the mental health advice and all this. So I'm going to do more of the real talk series I've been doing on here. So this is kind of a good one. I think a lot of appreciate it, and it's kind of like how I changed as a person. So I had some very bad views on autistic people at one point in my life. So basically, I'll explain the story, and you can see like why my views had changed. So when I was younger, my first experience from a very young age, I was like 7 or 8, around a person with autism he had a lot more wrong with him than autism. I'm going to really narrow the story down. So he was a neighbour, not like a direct neighbour, but on the same street. And basically, to cut a long story short, he beat up his mother and raped her. He was 15 years old. He was about 6'5". I think he had, is it gigantism? He had quite a fair, there was so much wrong with him. But when it was explained to me as a kid of why he did it, it was explained, hey, he's got autism, and that's why he's done this. So obviously I saw the police arrest him, I saw his mum in tears, I saw the bruise and the beating he'd given her, I saw like all these situations, but I didn't know like the full backstory. If there's any interest I could do that, and what he'd gone through, and I'm not excusing that, but like what had led up to this event. So all I was told is he's got autism. So he was a very bad kid. Well, I won't even go call him, he was a very bad young man. And I remember being like 9 or so, and I remember going out and he threw bricks at me, like proper just threw bricks at me. And my younger cousins who were like 5 or 6, nearly smashing their heads in, like proper, obviously he's a big guy for that age. And we were obviously tiny, and he was throwing these bricks at us. And he would go and he would smash up cars, he would attack people, he would give brutal beatings to people, because obviously he had the size of a man, and obviously these are little kids he's hitting, and he was out of control. And obviously I had this story about how he'd raped his mother and that. So I remember thinking, whoa, autistics, they're evil, they're terrifying, because I was scared of them as a kid. And then as I got older, my view didn't really change, because it's changed a lot over the last 10 years how the world portrays it, I would say. So it was still portrayed to me in the fact that, yeah, it's a mental health thing, but they're not right in the head, all that stuff. So obviously I had like this view, and obviously I always had this memory of him from a young age. And then when I was, obviously I'm age to a man now, I did jury duty. And basically, obviously, I can discuss the trial now. But basically, to cut it short, it was the defence of someone who'd done child molestation. And obviously I was on the jury, so I had to make my decision and everything. And basically the guy had pled not guilty, but when he got there and we heard all the stories, you try to be partial, you want to hear it all, because this young 12-year-old could be lying, maybe her parents have pressured her, there's so many things. So obviously you go in complete open mind, but he came up and we'd heard all of her story, and I was so open-minded. I was like, no, I'm going to be fair, I'm going to hear everything before I make my decision up. I don't want to send an innocent man to prison, all this stuff. He comes up on here and, when he comes up, he literally says the words, well, I've got, what was it? It was something, this might not be exactly correct, but pretty much is the thing, because I'm probably going to get the order. He goes, I've got low IQ, ADHD, and autism, so that makes it all right for me to do these things. Like, he actually said that. And everyone was like, whoa, he's guilty. Obviously, he'd had a psychological assessment that said his mentality was around the 16, 17-year-old, even though he was in his 20s. So we're not talking like he had the brains of a child. So he said this, and it infuriated me at the time. Like, yeah, I can rape someone because I've got autism. So he did this, and I was like, okay. Yeah, so everyone found him guilty, of course. It was a very easy thing to admit to doing it, And afterwards, that gave me a really nasty view. It was one of them things that stuck with me. I was like, oh, I don't really like that. He's justified with that. Now, I've worked, well, at that point, I'd done loads of stuff to work with kids in the gym or in a sport environment. And when I had done, I'd probably dealt with dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, but I'd never directly dealt with autism. So I didn't have first-hand experience here to learn for myself. I'd only had the bad experiences I'd seen of these people. So we cut forward to 5, 6 years later, and I don't want this video to drag too long so you don't listen to it, but we drag it on. And basically there was a girl who was a friend of the family. She wasn't, you know, I wasn't my girlfriend or that, but she became a friend of the family, and she had 2 kids, and you know, but one of them was autistic, and she was 7, I think, turning 8, if I remember the time I met her. Anyway, so I'm like, yeah, and I remember I had to go around to drop something in for them. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I was going round, and I'd been warned, literally by the mother and by others, sorry if my the young one plays up. She's autistic. She can be bad behaved and angry and all. Anyway, she's scared of new people, doesn't like them. So I was like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. I'm only in and out. Anyway, so I came down there. When I came in, there's this really tiny young girl who opens the door for me, who I imagined was the younger child. And, you know, she goes, hello. I'm like, hello. She goes, oh, wow. And I went, you all right? And she's like, I love your muscles. Well, I didn't realise she was a big fan of John Cena. So she was like really into the muscle. And she was like talking to me. I ended up spending quite a bit of time with the kid that day when she was really thin. And I spoke to her for about 15 minutes and thought, hey, what an awesome little kid she is. You know, she's quite a, what's the word? She's quite a unique kid, actually. You know, I thought, thin one. So we ended up seeing this person quite often for a little while. So the kid was around quite often. So I saw her loads. And during this time, she'd come up. And every time she saw me, she'd come up. She'd be like, Chris, give me this big hug, little cuddle. And she'd tell me about school and that. And I'd end up spending quite a bit of time with her. And I'd take her to the shop, buy her some more stuff. And she was so rewarding. She was so grateful. You could take her to the shop about, do you want something, Flower? And she'd be like, really? Can I have something? I don't want too much. And she was just so wet. And I'd never seen, like, she was just such a loving kid, but as well as being loving, she was just so appreciative and grateful. And I thought, fucking hell, you know, if this kid was my niece or I'd have spent so much, I would have spoiled her because she was just such a fucking awesome kid. And I was like, it really changed my views on it. And she was like, yeah, I'd like to learn a bit of boxing and that. And anyone, I don't know if you know me, I have a big boxing background in martial arts. And I was like, yeah, okay. So I started training her. And I got the pads out. I was like, you know, I'll teach her like you do the kids, you know, and she was so clever. And this is where her brain, obviously it was part of the autism, but she picked up stuff like that. And I'm talking stuff adults did. So I taught her this, and she's like, and she was so interested. She was like, okay, what next? And she was learning her feet movement, her hands, keeping up her guard, and everything just sank in. And like the second time I saw her, she remembered everything from the first time. It was as though there'd been no gap in sessions. And she was just, I said to the mum, the issue is she didn't have a great mother, if I'm honest, in taking an interest in the child. And I was like saying to the mum, I said, the thing is, I went, your kid is like super talented. She loves it. And she's so talented. She's just fucking awesome. You know, she really is, you know. I was like showing little videos of her to some coaches I knew, and they're like, how long have you been training? I'm like, this is 2 months really. And like, this is better than some kids who've been doing it for years. I said, oh, she just picks it up. You know, she's phenomenal. With the movement, she remembers everything, and she's so fast, and she was just so talented. And the fact she loved it made it great, but the mum won't really run with, hey, my kid's a bit of a special talent here. But no, obviously it caused me a lot. And I always remember, like, what really educated me on them was they were like, hey, you know, you can't talk to her when she's in a bad mood. You can't talk to her and all this. And I remember I came in, like, oh, she's playing up today. I'm really, really sorry. We can't deal with her. She's impossible to deal with and all this. And she was really angry. And I said, you all right, Flower, what's up with you? And she goes, I'm angry, Chris. And I said, oh, yeah. I said, do you want a hug? And she goes, no. Like that, like kids do. She goes, no. So I'm like, okay. I went, do you want to talk to me about it? She goes, no. I said, well, why are you angry? And she goes, I don't know. I said, you know what? I get angry sometimes. She goes, do you? I said, yeah, and sometimes I don't know why. And she goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, I think we all do. Had this proper little chat with her like you would a little kid, but, you know, I just spoke to her like a person. Had this little chat. Yeah, you know, sometimes, blah, blah, blah. I didn't tell her anything in advance. Talked to her a little bit. She goes, yeah, sometimes I do, Chris, and I don't like it when I get upset, blah, blah, blah. She talks to me for a bit. I said, no, that's fine. I went, she goes, can I have a hug now? I said, yeah, of course you can. Gave her a hug. The kid behaved perfectly. And all it was a different way of working with her, a different way of teaching her things and learning things. And she was such an intelligent kid. She was such a rewarding kid. Unfortunately, I don't see her anymore and that, but, you know, she's one of them kids that she'd be about 12, 13 now. And she's one of them that I really think she's looked after properly. And, you know, unfortunately, like I said, she had a bit of a crappy mother. But if she was, you know, pushed properly and helped properly, she's so much potential. She's so clever and so good. But yeah, basically, I was just trying to point out how, like, I was super judgmental, but